My name is William Harper, Will to those who know me. At 62 years old, I thought I had the measure of my life. A quiet life, spent in the rhythm of leather and thread, crafting shoes that carried a piece of my soul in every stitch. My hands, rough from years at the workbench, told a story of honest work, of a man who built something real with nothing but time and care. But that evening, at my son's family reunion in a glittering Denver hotel, my world shifted. My daughter-in-law, Lauren, pointed a perfectly manicured finger at me and called for security. "Remove this beggar from the gathering," she said, her voice sharp as a blade, slicing through the hum of polite conversation. My own son, Ethan, the boy I'd raised, whose dreams I'd carried on my shoulders through years of sacrifice, stood there, silent, his eyes fixed on the floor as if he could will himself invisible. They saw my worn jacket, my calloused hands, and decided I didn't belong. They mistook my quiet life for a small one, my grief for weakness. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that for the past 8 months, since my dearest friend Margaret passed away, I'd been carrying a secret sewn into the very fabric of their world. I'd inherited her 55% share of Silver Thread Artisans, the luxury shoemaking company that paid Lauren's 6-figure salary. As the security guard escorted me out of the hotel ballroom, past the polished shoes I'd once dreamed up with Margaret, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity, a cold, steady focus. They'd mistaken my patience for surrender, and I was about to show them the difference. Before I go on, let me pause for a moment. Where are you listening from today? Drop it in the comments below. And if you believe a man's worth lies in his character, not his clothes, give this video a like and hit that subscribe button. It means more than you know. That night, as I walked away from the glowing lights of the hotel, the sting of Lauren's words lingered. Beggar. The word echoed in my mind, not because it was true, but because it revealed how little they understood, how little they saw me. I'd spent my life crafting beauty from leather, shaping souls that carried people through their days. I didn't need their approval, but I did need them to learn, to understand that respect isn't owed to wealth or status, but to the quiet strength of a life well lived. The drive back to my small house in the Denver suburbs was quiet. Just the hum of my old pickup truck and the weight of that word. Beggar. It wasn't the insult that hurt. It was the ease with which Lauren said it, the way Ethan's silence let it land. I'd raised him to be better than that. To stand up for what was right. Somewhere along the way he'd forgotten. Or maybe he'd chosen to forget. My home was nothing fancy. A single-story brick house, paid off years ago, with a garage I'd turned into my sanctuary. The air inside always carried the scent of leather and wax, the smell of a life spent working with my hands. I walked straight to my workbench, where a half-finished pair of Oxfords sat waiting. The leather was soft but strong, the kind that holds its shape through years of wear. I ran my fingers over it, feeling the grain, the truth of it. This was my world. A world of patience, of precision, of things built to last. I thought about Margaret, my friend who'd left me those shares. She'd been the heart of Silver Thread Artisans, a woman who saw beauty in the details, just like me. We'd spent hours in her workshop years ago, sketching designs, testing leathers, dreaming of shoes that weren't just fashion, but art. I never wanted the spotlight, so I stayed in the background, crafting in my own quiet way. When she passed, her letter came like a whisper from the past. "Will," she wrote, "you're the soul of what we built. Protect it." Those shares, 55% of her company, were her trust in me. A trust I'd left untouched, out of grief. Until tonight. Lauren didn't know any of this. To her, I was just Ethan's father, an old man in a faded jacket who didn't fit her polished world. She thought she'd won when that security guard walked me out. But she'd misread the grain of the moment, the way you can misread leather if you don't respect its strength. I wasn't broken. I was focused. I'd spent my life shaping things that endured. And now, I'd shape a lesson she'd never forget. Sitting at my workbench, I picked up my awl, its handle worn smooth by years of use. The weight of it grounded me. I wasn't going to shout or fight. That wasn't my way. My way was careful, deliberate, like stitching a soul that would hold for decades. Lauren and Ethan thought they knew power, the kind that comes with titles and bank accounts. But real power, the kind that comes from knowing who you are, that's what I had, and I was ready to use it. I looked at the framed photo of Anna on my workbench, her smile soft, like the light of a Colorado sunset. She'd always said I had a quiet strength, the kind that didn't need to be loud to be felt. "You're my craftsman," she'd say, her hand on mine. That night, I felt her presence, a reminder of why I'd never let anyone take my dignity, not even family. The call came on a Thursday morning. I was in my workshop, the air thick with the warm, earthy scent of leather polish. My hands were steady, guiding a needle through a piece of calfskin, each stitch a small promise of something lasting. This was my sanctuary, my place of peace. The world outside could be loud and chaotic, but here it was just me and the leather, a conversation that never lied. The phone's ring cut through that quiet like a stranger's knock. I wiped, my hands on a rag, the calluses catching on the cloth, and glanced at the screen. Ethan. My son. A name that used to mean everything, but now felt like a weight I carried alone. I answered, keeping my voice even. "Ethan. Been a while." His voice came through, smooth and polished, like he was selling me something. "Hey, Dad. Everything okay?" I could hear the rush in his tone, the way he always sounded these days, like he was halfway out the door. "Yeah, everything's fine. Listen, Lauren and I are hosting a family reunion this Saturday at the Grandview Hotel. It's kind of a big deal." He paused, choosing his words like they were fragile. "We'd really like you to be there." I leaned against my workbench, the cool edge pressing into my back. The Grandview was one of those places that screamed money, all glass and chandeliers, the kind of place where people like me stood out for all the wrong reasons. "Big deal, huh?" I said, keeping my voice light. "What's the occasion?" Ethan cleared his throat, and I could almost see him adjusting his tie, the way he did when he was nervous. "Lauren's boss, Catherine Wells, will be there, from Silver Thread Artisans. It's a chance for her to shine, maybe lock in a promotion. It'd mean a lot if you came, Dad." I stayed quiet, my eyes drifting to the workbench, to the tools I'd used for decades. The awl with the handle worn smooth, the burnisher that had shaped 1,000 souls. To the photo of Anna, her smile catching the morning light. She'd always had a way of seeing through people, through their words, to the truth underneath. I could almost hear her now, warning me to tread carefully. "I don't know, son," I said finally. "Those kinds of events, they're not really my world anymore." Ethan's voice tightened just a fraction. "It's just a reunion, Dad. Family, you know. It's important to look like we're all together on this." I heard a murmur in the background. Lauren's voice, sharp and sweet, like a blade dipped in honey. "Tell him it's for us, Ethan. For our image." Ethan coughed, then repeated, her words like they were his own. "Lauren says it's important we look like a family. Just maybe dress up a bit, okay?" There it was, the real ask, hidden under the polite one. "Don't be you, Dad. Be someone who fits, someone who doesn't embarrass us." I closed my eyes, and a lifetime of sacrifices flickered through my mind. Selling my first shop, a little place on Colfax Avenue, so Ethan could go to college without a dime of debt. Working nights for 3 years to give him the money for his first business, a tech startup that crashed and burned. I never once mentioned the loss, never held it over him. I did it because he was my son, because I believed giving him a chance would make him a better man. The silence stretched between us. My fingers traced the edge of Anna's photo frame, her eyes steady and kind. She'd always believed in Ethan, even when I doubted. "Okay," I said at last, the word heavy in my mouth. "I'll be there." Ethan's voice brightened, but it felt hollow. "Great, Dad. That's great. Just, you know, be your best self." He hung up before I could ask what he thought my worst self was. I set the phone down and picked up my burnisher, the weight familiar in my hand. My best self. That was the man who built things, who took raw leather and shaped it into something beautiful, something that carried people through their lives. But Ethan and Lauren, they decided long ago that man wasn't worth showing off. They wanted a version of me that matched their world, polished, perfect, and forgettable. I chose my clothes carefully that Saturday, not to impress them, but to honor myself. A navy suit, tailored years ago, simple but sharp, and a pair of brogues I'd made myself, black leather, polished to a quiet shine, with stitching so precise you'd need a magnifying glass to find a flaw. They weren't flashy, but they were mine. They carried the weight of my work, my life. When I pulled up to the Grandview Hotel, the valet gave my old pickup a look that was half pity, half professionalism. I handed him the keys and stepped into a world of crystal and wealth. The lobby gleamed like a museum, all marble and soft lighting. I could feel the eyes on me, the man who didn't quite belong, but I held my head high. I wasn't here to fit in. I was here because Ethan asked, because despite everything, he was still my son. The Grandview Hotel's ballroom was a world apart from my workshop. Chandeliers dripped light like honey, casting a glow over tables draped in white linen. The air was heavy with the scent of expensive cologne and catered food, a far cry from the clean, earthy smell of leather and wax I knew so well. I stood near the edge of the room, holding a glass of sparkling water, feeling like a stranger in a place that screamed success. Lauren greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a quick, practiced peck on the cheek that felt more like a formality than affection. "Will, you made it," she said, her voice bright and sharp like glass. She scanned my suit, my shoes, and I saw the flicker of disappointment. "This is Ethan's father," she told a passing couple, her words clipped, as if my name alone wasn't worth the breath. I nodded, said my hellos, and found a spot by a tall window overlooking Denver's skyline. The city sparkled below, all sharp edges and ambition. Lauren's world, not mine. I watched her glide through the crowd, her tailored dress catching the light, her laugh perfectly timed. Ethan was at her side, working the room like a seasoned salesman, shaking hands, telling stories that made people nod and smile. He had the life I'd wanted for him, the one I'd poured my heart into building. But watching him now, I felt a hollow ache. Somewhere along the way, he'd traded his roots for this, for a world where I was just a shadow in the background. The evening dragged on. I stayed quiet, content to listen, to watch. I wasn't here to impress anyone. I was here for Ethan, or maybe for the boy he used to be. The one who'd sit in my workshop, wide-eyed, watching me stitch leather, asking 100 questions about why I loved it so much. It's about making something real, I'd told him, something that holds up. I wondered if he remembered. Dinner was announced, and we moved to a long table set with crystal and silver. Lauren had orchestrated it all, every detail perfect, from the folded napkins to the centerpiece of orchids. Catherine Wells, her boss, sat at the head, a woman with a quiet authority and eyes that missed nothing. She was admiring a display near the table. A pair of silver thread artisan's loafers, sleek and elegant, showcased under soft lighting. "These are exquisite," she said, her fingers brushing the leather. "Italian craftsmanship, I assume." Lauren beamed, soaking in the praise. "Exactly. Imported from Florence. The finest quality." I felt a tug in my chest. I knew those loafers. I'd recognize the stitching anywhere. The way the heel curved, the precise perforations. They weren't Italian. They were Margaret's design. One I'd helped her refine years ago in her workshop, back when silver thread was just a dream. We'd spent nights testing leathers, arguing over thread weight, laughing over coffee gone cold. Those loafers were American, born from our hands, our hearts. Without thinking, I spoke up, my voice quiet but clear. "Beautiful work," I said. "But they're not Italian. That's American leather, vegetable tanned, from a small tannery in Montana. You can tell by the grain and the stitching. Margaret had a way with those details." The table went still. Every eye turned to me. Catherine leaned forward, intrigued. "Really? How do you know that?" Before I could answer, Lauren's laugh cut through the air, sharp, brittle, like a needle snapping. "Oh, Will," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Always the shoemaker. He sees a pair of shoes and forgets where he is." She turned to Ethan, her smile gone, replaced by a tight line. "Ethan," she said, her voice low but carrying. "Can you call security?" Ethan froze, his fork hovering over his plate. "What? Why?" Lauren didn't look at me. She kept her eyes on him, her words a stage whisper meant for everyone. "Because I'd like this beggar removed from our gathering. He's embarrassing our guests." The word landed like a stone in still water. Beggar. The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine stared at her plate, a flush creeping up her neck. The other guests looked anywhere but at me, at their wine glasses, at the ceiling. I turned to Ethan, my son. The boy I'd carried through life with every choice I made. His face was pale, his eyes wide with that old, familiar panic, the kind he'd had as a kid when he didn't know what to do. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He did nothing, said nothing, just sat there, letting his wife's cruelty fill the space between us. I set my napkin down, careful and slow. My chair didn't scrape on the polished floor. I stood, my hands steady despite the ache in my chest. I looked at Lauren, her face a mask of cold triumph. I looked at Ethan, who wouldn't meet my eyes. I didn't need to say a word. My silence said enough. It was a verdict. A judgment on a room full of people who'd chosen to look the other way. As I walked out, my brogues clicking softly on the marble, I heard Lauren's voice follow me, sharp, victorious. See? Handled. The 2-hour drive back to my house was quiet, the city lights of Denver fading in my rearview mirror. They glittered like stars I'd never reach, and didn't want to. The sting of Lauren's word, the heavier weight of Ethan's silence, they didn't fade. They settled into me, not as pain, but as something else. A scar. Hard. Permanent. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the hurt had shifted. It wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was clarity, the kind that comes when a fog lifts. My house was dark, the air inside cool and familiar, smelling of leather and the faint lavender polish Anna used to love. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't pour a drink. I walked to my study, a small room lined with books on leatherwork and history. On my desk, a photo of Anna by a mountain lake, her smile brighter than the water behind her. Against the wall sat an old oak chest, a gift from Margaret, made for our wedding 40 years ago. I knelt, the floor creaking under me, and lifted the lid. The scent of wood and old paper rose up, a smell like memory itself. Inside was a folder, heavy, tied with a faded ribbon. My fingers found it without looking. Inside were pieces of a friendship that had shaped my life. A photo of me and Margaret, young and grinning, covered in leather scraps outside her first workshop. A napkin with "Our first agreement, Silver Thread Artisans," scribbled in her bold hand, and then the envelope. Thick, cream-colored, sealed with wax. It had arrived 9 months ago after Margaret's funeral. I broke the seal, unfolding the letter inside. Her handwriting was shaky but unmistakable. "Will," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, off stitching something in a better place. You were the heart of Silver Thread, the one who taught me what a true craft means. My 55% of the company is yours now. Protect it. Protect the people who make it real. I trust you." I folded the letter and set it down. For months I'd done nothing. Let the shares sit. A quiet wait in a lawyer's file. But tonight, standing in that ballroom, being dismissed like a stain on Lauren's perfect evening, something had changed. Margaret hadn't just left me a company. She'd left me a responsibility. A tool. I picked up the phone. My heart was steady, like the rhythm of a hammer on leather. It was time. The weight of that night at the Grandview Hotel didn't leave me. But it didn't break me either. It settled into my bones like the steady pressure of a hammer shaping leather. I wasn't angry. Anger burns too fast, leaves you empty. What I felt was something slower, something deliberate, like the careful stitches I'd put into a pair of shoes. knowing they'd hold for years. Lauren had called me a beggar. Ethan had let her. They thought they'd won. But they'd only shown me the grain of their character. And now I was ready to work with it. I sat in my study, the oak chest open beside me, Margaret's letter still in my hand. Her words were a call to action. Not just to protect silver thread artisans, but to protect the values we'd built it on. Honesty, craftsmanship, respect. Lauren didn't understand those things. She saw the world as a stage for her ambition, a place where people like me were props to be moved aside. But I wasn't a prop. I was the man holding 55% of her company. And it was time she learned what that meant. I picked up the phone and dialed Robert Klein, Silverthread's CFO. Robert was a steady man, the kind who understood numbers the way I understood leather, as something with a grain you had to respect. He answered on the third ring, his voice tired but warm. "Will Harper," I said, keeping my tone even. "Margaret was a friend of mine. She left me a few things, and I think it's time we talked." There was a pause. Not confusion, but something else. Like a man who'd been waiting for this call. "Will," he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "I've been hoping you'd reach out." We agreed to meet at a diner just outside Denver. A quiet place with worn booths and coffee that tasted like it had been brewed since the 70s. It was the kind of spot where truths could be spoken without an audience. Robert was already there when I arrived, a stack of papers by his elbow, his coffee cup half empty. He looked older than I remembered, the lines around his eyes carved deep by years of corporate battles. But his handshake was firm, his gaze steady. "Lauren's a rising star," he said after the waitress refilled his cup. Margaret saw her talent early, but she also saw the hunger, the kind that doesn't care what it consumes. He chose his words carefully, like a man handling a sharp tool. "She's tied to your son, Will. And Ethan, he's tied to her." I nodded, understanding the bind. "I want to see her department," I said. "Every project, every expense, every detail. I need to know what she's building with Margaret's legacy." Robert didn't ask why. He just slid a folder across the table. "I thought you might," he said. "This is the overview, but it's only part of the story. If you want to see how she handles pressure, there's a cleaner way." He sipped his coffee, his eyes meeting mine. "A surprise audit. Standard procedure. We call it cost optimization, but it lets us look into every corner without her knowing who's behind it." "Do it," I said. The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of a decision I'd been carrying since that night. Robert nodded, and I knew the wheels were turning. The audit would be the first cut. Not deep, but precise. Enough to make Lauren feel the pressure. For 2 days, Lauren rode the high of the reunion. In her mind, it was a triumph. Catherine Wells had been impressed, the guests charmed, and the small matter of her father-in-law, well, that had been handled with efficiency. She walked into Silverthread's offices on Monday morning, her heels clicking with confidence. Her mind already on her next big project, the Legacy Collection. A line of handcrafted shoes, her ticket to a senior role, a chance to cement her name in the industry. She was untouchable, or so she thought. Then the email arrived. No fanfare. Just a subject line from Robert's office. Notice of departmental audit. Lauren read it, her jaw tightening. An audit. Now. 2 weeks before the quarterly reports. She told herself it was nothing. Probably that petty rival, Sarah, from product design trying to slow her down. Lauren stayed late that night, the office empty except for the hum of the cleaning crew. She pored over spreadsheets, receipts, every number checked and rechecked. She wouldn't give anyone the satisfaction of finding a flaw. The pressure sharpened her, made her fierce. She thrived on it. She called Ethan on her. "Drive home," her voice sharp over the car's Bluetooth. "Sarah's behind this," she said, her words clipped. "A pathetic power play. She's jealous of the legacy collection." Ethan's voice was tired, placating. "Just be careful, Lauren. Don't give her anything to use." Lauren scoffed. "Careful? I'm going to bury her." She didn't see it, didn't suspect. The attack was coming from a direction she'd never considered. The audit ended on Friday. Robert called me that afternoon, his voice calm but pointed. "It's clean," he said. "Annoyingly so. A few padded client dinners, but nothing that'd raise a flag. She's careful." I nodded, staring out my workshop window at the oak chest Margaret had made. "That's not what this was for," I said. Robert understood. "It worked," he said. "I've got a full manifest. Every project, every vendor, every deadline. The legacy collection is her cornerstone. If that falls, her whole world does." "Thank you, Robert," I said. "Now we wait for the right moment to test her foundation." The audit was just the beginning, a ripple that hinted at the tide to come. Lauren thought she'd weathered it, convinced it was Sarah's doing. She had no idea the real force was a man she'd called a beggar. I spent the next few days in my workshop, my hands moving over leather, the rhythm of stitching grounding me. I tended to Anna's old rose garden, the petals soft under my fingers. I read a book on my porch, the Colorado air turning crisp with autumn. To the world, I was just Will Harper, a quiet man living a quiet life. But on my desk sat Robert's manifest, a map of Lauren's world, every detail laid bare. On Friday, I called Robert again. No diner this time. A phone call would do. "The legacy collection," I said, my voice steady as my hammer. "As the majority shareholder, I want it on indefinite." "Hold." Robert didn't ask why. He knew the tool I was using. "What do I tell Catherine?" he asked. "Tell her the new ownership is reviewing all major projects. It's just business." There was a pause. "It'll hit her hard, Will." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "I know. That's the point." The news reached Lauren like a quiet blade. A CC'd email from Catherine's office, subject, "Project Hold, Legacy Collection." She was in a meeting, pitching a marketing tweak, when her phone buzzed. Her smile faltered, just for a moment. She excused herself, her voice tight, and stepped into the hall. Panic crept in, cold, sharp. The legacy collection wasn't just a project. It was her future. Her proof that she'd risen above the ordinary life she despised. To have it frozen, without reason, was a gut punch. She called Catherine, who was furious but clueless. "It's the new shareholder," she snapped. "No one knows who they are, but they've got the board rattled." Lauren tried Robert's office, but his assistant was a wall of polite deflection. The rival theory didn't hold anymore. This was bigger. A shadow moving pieces she couldn't see. That night, at home, Lauren's composure cracked. "Someone's trying to ruin me, Ethan!" she shouted, slamming a glass on the counter. "This isn't a setback. It's an attack." Ethan, helpless as always, could only mumble, "What can I do, Lauren? I don't know who it is." Then, in a moment of desperation, Ethan's mind made a leap. "Maybe," he said slowly, Maybe it's Dad. Lauren froze, her eyes narrowing. Your father, the shoemaker. That's absurd. But Ethan pressed on, his voice unsteady. He knew Margaret. He worked with her years ago, and after the reunion, he was upset. Maybe he called someone, pulled some old favor. It was a wild guess, born from guilt he hadn't faced. But to Lauren, it clicked. The old man, the one she'd dismissed. He was the only face she could pin to her invisible enemy, her. Panic turned to rage. "Get your coat," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "We're going to see your father. It's time he learned who he's dealing with." The sound of their BMW crunching up my gravel driveway was like a challenge. Too loud, too sure of itself for the quiet street where I'd lived for 35 years. I was in my living room, polishing the leather on an old pair of boots Anna had loved, the rhythm of the cloth steadying my hands. I didn't rush to the door. I let them knock, let the silence build. When I opened it, they stepped inside like they owned the place, bringing a gust of cold evening air and something sharper, entitlement. Ethan looked out of place, his eyes darting around the small, neat room, as if he were seeing it for the first time. Lauren, though, she was all predator, her heels clicking on the hardwood like accusations. She didn't waste time on hellos. "This game of yours ends now, Will," she said, her voice polished and cutting. "We know you're behind it." She dropped her designer bag onto the armchair where Anna used to read, a casual claim on my space. I finished buffing the boot, the leather gleaming soft under the lamp, before turning to face them. My voice stayed low, even. "I don't know what game you mean, Lauren." Ethan stepped forward, his role as the reluctant peacemaker clear in his hunched shoulders. "Dad, please," he said, his tone pleading. "Just stop. Whatever you did, whoever you called, undo it. This isn't you." "Unnecessary," Lauren cut in, her laugh short and without humor. "He's sabotaging my career, Ethan, and you're asking him to play nice?" She turned her full gaze on me, eyes narrowed, like she was sizing up a flaw in a design. "I don't know who you think you are, but you pulled strings. Some old shoemaker favor from your days with Margaret. And now my legacy collection is frozen. Call it off. Now." I let her words hang in the air, the only sound the faint tick of the clock in the hall, a rhythm they'd long forgotten. I looked from her furious face to Ethan's anxious one. I didn't admit a thing, didn't deny it either. I just sat in my armchair, the one with arms worn to fit my shape, and asked the simplest question. Why would I do that? Lauren was ready, her list of my sins rehearsed like a pitch. Why? Because you're bitter, Will. Embarrassed at the reunion. Jealous of the life we've built. The one you could never touch. You're punishing us for outgrowing you. I let her finish, taking a slow breath, the air tasting of leather and memory. I'm not bitter, Lauren, I said, my voice calm as the curve of a well-shaped soul. I'm disappointed. I looked past her to Ethan. A father has a right to be disappointed when his son stands by while his wife calls for security. To drag him out of a family gathering. Then, I turned back to her, letting the word she'd thrown at me echo back. And a craftsman, the one you mocked, has a right to be disappointed when a marketing director can't spot the difference between real craftsmanship and a knockoff. Her face flushed, a deep red that clashed with her lipstick. Ethan winced like the words had landed on him. I wasn't done. You talk about the life you've built. Who laid the foundation? I sold my shop on Colfax, the only thing I had left from my dad, so Ethan could graduate debt-free. When his startup tanked, I cashed in my savings, watched Anna worry over every bill, so his name wouldn't be ruined. I spoke like I was reading from a ledger, each sacrifice a line item, clean and true. Those weren't loans, Lauren. No strings. Just gifts. All I asked in return was basic decency. Not applause, just the grace not to treat me like a beggar at my own son's table. The room went quiet. My words had unraveled their story. The one where they were self-made, and I was the resentful old man holding them back. They'd come expecting a fight they could win. Instead, they found a mirror, and the reflection wasn't kind. Lauren recovered first, her anger wrapping around her pride like armor. "This changes nothing," she said, her voice trembling just a touch. "There's a board meeting next week, introducing new leadership. I'll present the legacy collection. I'll win them over. You can't stop that." I just looked at her. No need for words. I could see the path she'd chosen, blind to the power she couldn't charm or control. Her ambition was a blindfold, leading her straight into the light I'd set. Ethan glanced between us, his face twisted with confusion and a dawning guilt. "Lauren, maybe we should go," he murmured. But she was already at the door, her confidence a fragile shield. They left without another word. I watched from the window as their car pulled away, tires spitting gravel. They told themselves they were still in charge, still driving. But the road ahead wasn't theirs anymore. I stayed in that armchair long after they were gone. The house settled into quiet. But this time it felt like strategy, not loneliness. Lauren was right about one thing. The board meeting was her last shot. She'd prepare like her life depended on it, pouring every ounce of her talent into a presentation to dazzle the new chairman. She had no idea she'd be pitching to the beggar she'd thrown out. The confrontation shook them, but I knew Lauren. A cornered fighter doesn't bend. She swings harder. She couldn't grasp a power she couldn't see, so she doubled down on the one she trusted, her performance. It was time to give her the stage. I called Robert the next morning. "Announce the company's future," I said. "Schedule a mandatory all-hands town hall for Friday. Topic: new strategic vision, and an introduction to the leadership." Robert paused, then added, "And a presentation slot for key projects. Final approval from the chairman?" "Exactly," I said. "She'll take the bait." The email went out an hour later, landing in Lauren's inbox like a lifeline. For weeks, she'd been battling shadows. Now the mystery chairman was offering her a chance, a spotlight to reclaim it all. In her head, it made sense. The hold was a test, the audit a hurdle, and this meeting her victory lap. If she nailed the pitch, she'd dazzle him, erase the mess and rise higher. Her fear melted into focus. She canceled plans, arrived at dawn, left after dark. Her team endured endless rehearsals, every slide scrutinized, every word polished. Ethan told me later she was possessed. Talking margins in her sleep, her eyes wild with the thrill of the win. She never paused to wonder who'd built the door she was about to walk through. I spent the week differently, quietly. On Wednesday, I drove to the cemetery outside Denver, the sky a vast Colorado blue, the air crisp enough to bite. Anna's stone was simple. Anna Harper, a life of quiet grace. I replaced the wilted flowers with a handful of wild sunflowers from the roadside. I didn't speak aloud, but in the silence, I told her everything. The reunion, the word. Beggar, Ethan's silence. Margaret's letter. The fear that setting this right might change me into someone she wouldn't know. You'd understand, I thought. You always saw the difference between a fight and a fix. I stayed until the sun dipped low, shadows stretching across the grass. When I left, calm had rooted in me. This wasn't just about the company. It was about defending the life we'd shared, the values that held. Thursday, I worked in my shop, took a rough piece of cowhide and set it on the bench. No plan, just the feel of it under my hands. I started with a knife, shaving away the rough edges, then the burnisher, smoothing until the grain shone true. Hours slipped by, shavings piling like fallen leaves. It was meditation, turning chaos into something honest. That evening, with the scent of leather still on me, I called. Ethan, he answered quick, wary. Dad. Ethan, I said, neutral. There's a town hall at Silverthread Friday. Be there. A beat. Why? What's it got to do with me? You're my son, I said simply. Family. I want you there as family. He hesitated, gears turning. Curiosity, guilt, duty. Okay, Dad, I'll come. I didn't thank him, just said, good, and hung up. He needed to see it, the full weight of his choices. Before bed, I stood in my study, looking at that old photo of me and Margaret. Two dreamers knee-deep in leather scraps. We'd built our first designs on a card table, thinking we were invincible. She chased the big leagues. I stayed with my hands, but the base was the same. Do right by your craft, never fake the quality. I'll honor it, Margaret, I whispered to her grin. The light went out, preparations done. Tomorrow, the truth would speak. The conference room at Silverthread was a far cry from my shop. All glass walls and a long ebony table reflecting the Rocky Mountain view. The air hummed with AC, smelling of steel and ambition. Nothing like the honest tang of leather. I watched from a side office on a monitor Robert set up. Better this way. Not a presence, but a consequence. Employees filed in, faces a mix of nerves and curiosity. Suits and dresses, the armor of corporate life. Ethan slipped in, front row for guests, fidgeting with his tie, eyes scanning like he wanted, and out. He was a visitor in a world he craved. Then Lauren took the stage. Radiant in a crisp gray suit, she owned the room, her confidence a living thing. She smiled, warm and winning, promising victory. Her presentation on the Legacy collection was flawless. Renderings of elegant boots and loafers, timeless yet bold. She walked them through details, hand-stitched uppers, custom soles, the story of luxury rooted in craft. She spoke their language, margins, branding, vision made real. She was good, talented even, but talent without roots is like a shoe without a sole. Pretty, but it won't last. The room applauded when she finished. Genuine, warm. She stood in the lights, triumphant, believing she'd saved herself. Then Robert stepped up, his gray suit a steady anchor. Thank you, Lauren, he said, even and professional. Exceptional work. She nodded, gracious as a queen. Robert continued. As you know, Silverthread has new ownership. A return to our roots. He paused, eyes sweeping the room. It's my honor to introduce our new chairman, holder of 55% controlling interest, Margaret's closest friend, her first collaborator, and in my view the finest craftsman I've known. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. William Harper, I walked out from the side. Same suit from the reunion, same brogues I'd made. The silence hit like a held breath, heavy, absolute. Faces turned, confusion, then shock. I saw Lauren first. Her smile froze, cracked, fell away. Her eyes raced, calculating the impossible. The beggar, on stage. Her face drained to chalk, terror raw beneath. Then Ethan, mouth open, eyes wide with horror, the ghost of every forgotten sacrifice staring back. In that shatter of a moment, he got it. All of it. I stepped to the podium. No notes, just the truth. My voice, when it came, was calm, clear as a fresh-cut edge. "Lauren," I began, holding her gaze. She flinched. "That was brilliant. You have a gift for story, for making people see what you want." The compliment landed soft, unexpected, but she recoiled like it burned. "A true artisan knows their materials," I went on. "A real leader knows her people. In both you've fallen short." I paused, the room still as death. At a family reunion in a hotel built on dreams like ours, you called security to remove this beggar from the gathering. Her hand gripped the podium edge, knuckles white. "Today, in this room, I'm asking you to clear your desk." A gasp rippled through. Lauren swayed, steadying herself. "However," I added, the correction complete, "silver thread has heart. There's an opening in packaging, wrapping the shoes we craft. It asks, respect for what others create, a chance to start clean. Maybe that's where you begin." She didn't scream, didn't collapse. She just folded, shoulders slumping, head bowing. A single choked sob broke the quiet, loud, unnerving. The show was over. Ethan bolted up, stumbling to the stage, not to fight, not to shield. Just a man drawn to the ruin. He stopped short, hand out, face wrecked. "Dad, I didn't—" Words failed him. I looked down at my son, the anger long gone, replaced by a deep, tired sorrow. He wasn't evil, just lost, a string of wrong turns. "We'll talk later, Ethan," I said, softer now, "when you remember who you are." The chairman's office didn't stay a corner suite long. Within days, I had Robert haul out the glass desk and stiff chairs, brought in my workbench from home, set my tools in a row, awls, hammers, lasts. The air shifted, from sterile chill to the warm scent of leather and wax. Blueprints on the bench weren't for empires, but for a simple pair of wingtips I was dreaming up. I ran the company my way, hands-on, honest. Lauren didn't take the packaging job. Her desk emptied the next day, her name scrubbed from the directory. She vanished from Denver, a ghost of drive and shattered plans. I never heard from her again. A month later, Ethan showed up unannounced, at my office shop door, thinner, eyes clear like they hadn't been since boyhood. No suit, just jeans and a plain shirt. He'd quit his job. "I applied to a non-profit," he said, voice steady but low. "They repair shoes for the homeless, teach the craft, start next week as an apprentice." He looked at his hands, soft, unmarked. "I want to build something, real again, with these." I didn't stand. didn't hug. The gap between us was too wide for easy bridges. Forgiveness without work would be another lie. Instead, I nodded, reached for the smoothed cowhide from my week of quiet work, held it out. "Start here," I said. "Feel it. Its weight, its truth. When you know the leather, we'll talk about mending souls." He took it, turning it over, fingers tracing my cuts. For the first time in years, when he met my eyes, he saw me. His father. Not a shadow. Not a debt. Just Will. That evening, alone on the office balcony, Denver sprawled below, lights twinkling like distant fires. Traffic hummed faint, wind whispering through the high-rises. I didn't feel victory's rush. The bitter edge of payback had dulled, leaving something purer, no joy either, the price too steep. What settled was peace, deep, unshakable. The scales balanced, the fix complete. The greatest lesson from all this: a man's dignity is his. Bedrock, non-negotiable. It's what his life stands on. You can't trade it for harmony, or to ease someone else's comfort, not even kin. When you let your sacrifices become their due, you're not generous. You're teaching them your worth is theirs to spend. Setting a boundary isn't war, it's survival. The moment you say you're quiet won't be taken for yes. A boundary isn't a wall to shut folks out forever. It's a door. One that teaches them to knock with respect before stepping in. It's reclaiming your key, deciding for yourself who belongs inside. If you hold that a man's dignity is his truest wealth, like and subscribe. Don't miss more tales of quiet strength rising.